Silent Hill has always been more than just a simple horror video game. It's a story that explores trauma, guilt, and evil in a way that stays with you long after you turn off the screen. Today we're going to rank the 7 most evil and disturbing human characters in the franchise. These characters not only torment the game's protagonists, but also leave a mark on us as players. Each of these individuals has a story and a motive that will make you question just how far a person can go when lost in darkness. So take a seat, turn off the lights, and join me on this journey through the fog-covered streets of Silent Hill to meet some of these characters. Number 7. Eddie Dumbrowski. Eddie Dumbrowski is one of the most tragic and disturbing characters in Silent Hill 2. His story exposes the psychological effects of abuse, humiliation, and repressed anger, themes that Silent Hill explores in unsettling ways. Eddie doesn't start as a villain, but the town pushes him to his limits, amplifying his fears and hatred until he becomes capable of committing extreme acts of violence. From a young age, Eddie was constantly bullied because of his appearance and weight. The insults and mockery from his peers left deep emotional scars, feeding a latent anger he never learned to control. This accumulated torment eventually drove him to commit his first violent act, shooting a dog and injuring its owner after being harassed. Although Eddie tried to justify his actions as self-defense, this marked the beginning of his descent into violence. In Silent Hill, Eddie's fears and paranoia are amplified, manifesting as hallucinations of constant mockery. He believes that everyone is judging or laughing at him, even when it's not true. This distorted thinking turns him into a dangerously defensive man, ready to attack anyone he perceives as a threat, real or imagined. Eddie's encounters with James Sunderland reveal his gradual mental deterioration. At first, Eddie appears anxious and scared, denying having killed anyone, though a nearby corpse suggests otherwise. As the story progresses, he becomes more aggressive and paranoid. At a critical moment, Eddie admits to killing a man simply because he thought the man was laughing at him. This act of violence demonstrates how Silent Hill has completely twisted his perception of reality. Eddie's story reaches its climax in a meat locker, where he confronts James in a final showdown. Here, Eddie justifies his violence by saying the world has always treated him like garbage, and that killing is his way of regaining control. This moment underscores just how far he has fallen into madness, driven by years of abuse and his inability to cope with rejection. Eddie's tragic tale ends with his death at James's hands. His life serves as a grim reminder of how trauma and abuse can warp a person, driving them to commit horrific acts in an attempt to cope with their pain. Number 6. Thomas Orosco. Although he does not appear physically in Silent Hill 2, Thomas Orosco is deeply present through the trauma he inflicted on his daughter, Angela Orosco. His acts of abuse shaped not only Angela's perception of herself, but also the twisted otherworld she experiences in Silent Hill. The psychological damage caused by Thomas led Angela to a final confrontation where she ended his life. However, this did not bring her peace. Instead, it left her burdened with guilt and self-loathing. In Silent Hill, Angela's trauma takes form through Abstract Daddy, a monster symbolizing her abuse. This encounter reveals the scars abuse can leave on victims, perpetuating their pain long after the perpetrator is gone. Angela's interactions with James Sunderland further highlight how deeply her past has broken her. Convinced she deserves of suffering, Angela struggles with feelings of shame and a distorted sense of self-worth. In her, we see a powerful representation of the long-term impact of abuse and trauma, central themes in Silent Hill. Thomas Orosco's influence is one of the most disturbing in the series. Though physically absent, his legacy persists, embodying the psychological horror experienced by those who endure the darkest forms of human abuse. Number 5. Dr. Michael Kaufman. Dr. Michael Kaufman represents a colder, more calculating type of evil. As the director of Alchemella Hospital and a high-ranking member of the Order, Kaufman is a character whose ambition and corruption make him one of the most despicable antagonists in the franchise. His involvement in Silent Hill's horrors is indirect but devastating, working behind the scenes to manipulate the most vulnerable. In Silent Hill and its prequel, Silent Hill Origins, Kaufman uses his position as a doctor to build a drug empire that funds the Order's activities. By exploiting a plant called White Claudia, he manufactures a hallucinogenic substance known as PTV, which he distributes while preying on addicts. Although deeply involved in the cult's dark rituals, Kaufman's motivations are not religious, but purely selfish. He seeks money, power, and control, with no regard for the consequences. His manipulation takes a particularly dark turn in his relationship with Lisa Garland, a young nurse working at Alchemilla Hospital. Kaufman turns Lisa into a PTV addict to keep her under his control, forcing her to care for Dahlia Gillespie, the centerpiece of the Order's twisted plan. Isolated and trapped by her addiction, Lisa gradually loses her sanity and ultimately her life, all under Kaufman's ruthless manipulation. Although Kaufman appears to be a temporary ally for the first game's protagonist, Harry Mason, his lack of empathy and loyalty quickly becomes apparent. Cold and calculating, Kaufman shows no fear in the face of Silent Hill's supernatural horrors. His pragmatism leads him to act against Dahlia Gillespie, throwing aglyphotus liquid on the Order's god in an attempt to save himself. However, this act only transforms the deity into an even more monstrous form, unleashing chaos and revealing the depths of his selfishness. Dr. Michael Kaufman embodies a realistic kind of evil, the exploitation and manipulation of the vulnerable for personal gain. His lack of supernatural abilities makes him even more terrifying, as his actions reflect what humans are capable of in their pursuit of power. His calculating coldness and complete lack of empathy make him a disturbingly realistic figure within the Silent Hill universe, capable of eliciting both disgust and fascination for the dark side of human nature he represents. Number 4. Father Vincent Smith. Father Vincent Smith is one of the most morally ambiguous and corrupt characters in Silent Hill 3. As a priest of the Order, Vincent combines his position of religious authority with a selfish and manipulative approach, making him a disturbing and complex figure. His actions are not motivated by genuine faith, but by a desire to maintain his status and power, regardless of the consequences for others. Unlike other members of the Order who fervently seek the rebirth of their god, Vincent is content with the pleasures and benefits of the earthly world. His pragmatism and disdain for Silent Hill's supernatural aspects set him apart from characters like Claudia Wolf. While Claudia is obsessed with fulfilling the Order's prophecy, Vincent mocks her beliefs, even suggesting that the monsters Heather Mason faces might be real people perceived as monsters. This unsettling comment reveals his manipulative nature and sadistic enjoyment in sowing doubt in others. Vincent first appears in an office building within Silent Hill's otherworld, presenting himself as an ally to Heather. However, his cryptic words and unsettling behavior create distrust. Though he claims to oppose Claudia's plans, his motives are far from altruistic. He seeks to protect his own interests, using Heather as a means to confront Claudia and preserve his position within the Order. This calculated approach and his ability to play both sides make him a master manipulator. His moral corruption is reflected in his exploitation of the Order's resources for personal gain. Vincent embezzles funds and indulges in earthly luxuries while exploiting the faith of others. While Claudia pursues a distorted ideal of paradise, Vincent uses his influence to consolidate power, showcasing a hypocrisy that is particularly disgusting in someone with a spiritual role. Vincent's fate reaches its climax in the Order's church, where he directly confronts Claudia. His mockery and contempt for her end with Claudia fatally stabbing him, revealing that his selfishness and manipulation were not enough to save him. Even in death, Vincent desperately tries to maintain his influence, demonstrating his total disconnect from any noble cause. Vincent is a reminder that the most dangerous monsters aren't always supernatural. His corruption and opportunism reflect a form of human evil that is chillingly realistic, fueled by selfishness and a complete lack of empathy. Number 3. Claudia Wolf. Claudia Wolf is one of the most complex and tragic characters in Silent Hill 3. Her religious fanaticism and obsessive quest to summon the Order's god make her a deeply unsettling antagonist. As a priestess of the cult, Claudia's motivations go beyond power or glory. She genuinely believes her mission is to bring about a world free from suffering, even if it requires sacrificing others and stripping away their autonomy. Claudia's past is marked by abuse and trauma. She grew up under the strict and cruel influence of her father, Leonard Wolf, a religious zealot who severely punished any sign of weakness. During her childhood, Claudia found solace in her friendship with Dahlia Gillespie, another victim of the Order. This relationship shaped her beliefs, as she saw in Alessa a symbol of human suffering and the need to redeem the world. However, this connection also fueled her obsession with fulfilling the Order's prophecy, even at the cost of her humanity. Claudia views the world as a corrupt place, filled with pain and sin. Her fervent belief in the rebirth of a god to eradicate this suffering drives her to extreme measures. In her vision, creating paradise involves stripping humanity of its desires and individuality, revealing how distorted her idea of salvation has become. For Claudia, the end justifies the means, even if it requires inflicting unimaginable pain. Heather Mason, the protagonist of Silent Hill 3, is Claudia's central target. As the reincarnation of Alessa, Heather is seen by Claudia as the perfect vessel to birth the cult's god. In her obsession, Claudia orchestrates the murder of Heather's father, Harry Mason, using a creature called the Missionary. This act, meant to fill Heather with hatred and despair, demonstrates Claudia's willingness to destroy anything in her way. In the game's climax, when Heather thwarts her plans by expelling the god from her body using Aglafotis, Claudia makes a desperate decision. Consuming the divine fetus herself, she attempts to become the vessel for the god. However, her body cannot withstand the transformation, leading to her death in the creation of a malformed being that Heather ultimately destroys. Claudia Wolf is a harrowing portrait of fanaticism taken to the extreme. While her intentions are rooted in a desire to end suffering, her methods and the devastation she causes make her a profoundly disturbed figure. Number 2. Dahlia Gillespie. Dahlia Gillespie is undoubtedly one of the most malevolent forces in the Silent Hill franchise, embodying sinister manipulation disguised as religious fervor. As a leader of the Order, Dahlia's ambitions go beyond personal redemption or even power. She is entirely committed to bringing about the birth of the divine entity that, in her eyes, will transform the world. Her role in Silent Hill is defined by abusive and exploitative actions, not only toward her daughter, Alessa Gillespie, but also toward anyone she deems useful to the cult's goals. Dahlia's defining act of horror revolves around her daughter, Alessa. She doesn't see Alessa as a child to love, but as a tool to fulfill the cult's prophecy. When she discovers Alessa's innate supernatural abilities, Dahlia immediately envisions using her daughter to bring the Order's god into the world. To Dahlia, Alessa is nothing more than a vessel, a means to an end. Driven by this distorted vision, she subjects her young daughter to an unimaginable fate. In a twisted ritual intended to impregnate Alessa with a god, Dahlia sets her on fire. While the ritual fails to produce the god she envisioned, it leaves Alessa with severe and lasting physical and emotional trauma. Yet Dahlia feels no remorse for what she has done, viewing Alessa's suffering as a necessary sacrifice for her greater plan. To keep Alessa alive and in a constant state of torment, Dahlia confines her in a hidden room in the basement of Alchemilla Hospital, where she is subjected to nearly endless physical pain. Using spells and occult knowledge, Dahlia manipulates Alessa's powers, keeping her in a comatose state and preventing her wounds from healing. This torment fuels Silent Hill's dark powers, manifesting the twisted parallel world filled with monsters that embody Alessa's fears and pain. Dahlia's intention is to prolong her daughter's suffering, knowing it will eventually draw the other half of her soul, Cheryl, a childlike manifestation of Alessa, back to Silent Hill. Dahlia's manipulation and deceit extend beyond her daughter. She also ensnares an unsuspecting Harry Mason, who enters Silent Hill searching for his missing daughter, Cheryl. Knowing Harry's love for his daughter could serve her purpose, Dahlia manipulates him into helping her, presenting herself as an ally while concealing her true intentions. She exploits his desperation, providing cryptic guidance that brings him closer to Alessa while advancing her own goals. In essence, Dahlia views everyone around her as disposable, mere pawns to move and sacrifice at her convenience. Her interactions with Harry are chilling due to her ability to mask her true motives, keeping him trapped in her web of lies and manipulation until it's too late. Dahlia is not content with merely worshiping the gods she envisions. She desires to wield its power, to act as the mother of this new creation and the grand priestess of a reformed world. Her aspirations for divinity reveal a disturbingly narcissistic side, as she believes herself uniquely qualified to interpret and fulfill divine will, regardless of the suffering she causes. Dahlia's villainy is reinforced by her sharp intellect and mastery of manipulation. She has a disturbing ability to understand others' weaknesses and exploit them to her advantage. This is especially evident in her interactions with Dr. Michael Kaufman. Dahlia persuades Kaufman to assist her by convincing him to drug Lisa Garland, Alessa's caretaker, with the addictive PTV substance. This ensures Lisa's obedience and keeps Alessa under constant watch, safeguarding Dahlia's interests in preventing any interference with her twisted scheme. Dahlia is meticulous in her planning, ensuring that everyone around her becomes either an ally, a pawn, or a helpless victim. Despite her undeniable intelligence and cunning, Dahlia's ambitions ultimately lead to her downfall. After manipulating Harry into helping her confront Alessa, Dahlia succeeds in merging the divided souls of Alessa, finally enabling her to summon the god she has long desired. However, this moment of triumph is abruptly cut short when Dr. Kaufman, disillusioned and desperate to escape the hellish otherworld Dahlia's ritual has unleashed, turns against her. He throws a vial of aglaophotis at the newly born god, triggering a transformation that horrifies even Dahlia. In an instant, the god she so fervently awaited becomes a monstrous and uncontrollable entity. Now in its nightmarish incubus form, the god attacks, killing Dahlia with a devastating lightning strike. Her end is swift, ironic, and brutal, a stark contrast to the years of calculated cruelty she inflicted on others. Dahlia Gillespie's legacy is one of destruction, suffering, and betrayal. Her actions leave indelible scars on Silent Hill, from the otherworld she helped create to the physical and emotional wounds inflicted on her daughter, Alessa. Number 1. Walter Sullivan. Walter Sullivan is perhaps the darkest and most psychologically disturbing figure in the Silent Hill franchise, embodying a chilling blend of childhood trauma, twisted beliefs, and brutal murders. Taking the top spot on this list, Walter's character delves into the bleakest aspects of human experience, leaving an indelible scar on the world of Silent Hill 4: The Room. A product of deep manipulation, abandonment, and religious extremism, Walter's story unfolds as a harrowing descent into madness, where love, hate, and horror merge into a dark ritual. Walter was born in room 302 of South Ashfield Heights, an apartment he believed to be his mother, after being abandoned there by his parents immediately after birth. With no one to care for him, he was sent to Wish House, an orphanage run by the Order. Wish House, located near Silent Hill, served as a front for the Order's Holy Mother's sect, a faction dedicated to indoctrinating orphans and preparing them for ritual sacrifices. From the beginning, Walter's life was steeped in violence, cult indoctrination, and psychological torment, fueling his transformation into a deeply disturbed and ultimately dangerous individual. At the orphanage, Walter suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of authority figures. Most significantly, he was manipulated into believing that his true mother was room 302, and that his life's purpose was to reunite with her. Walter's early exposure to brutal punishments, isolation, and distorted beliefs instilled in him a dangerous mix of faith and desperation. While other children might have developed a natural sense of self, Walter's worldview became increasingly twisted, driven by the idea that room 302, the place of his birth, was alive and waiting for him. This belief would later drive him to attempt a gruesome ritual, the 21 Sacraments, designed to reconnect him with his mother. Walter's upbringing at Wish House introduced him to the distorted doctrines of the Order, particularly those of the Holy Mother's sect, which saw him as the conjurer. Guided by figures like Jimmy Stone and George Roston, high-ranking members of the cult, Walter was taught that his life was predestined for ritual sacrifice. The completion of the 21 Sacraments, a bloody ritual meant to summon the Order's god and transformed his mother, room 302, into a divine vessel. The ritual required him to kill 21 people, each representing a different aspect of the Holy Mother. Indoctrinated and deeply traumatized, Walter saw this path as the only way to reunite with his mother. His indoctrination, coupled with his trauma, created a dangerously unstable psyche that justified even the most atrocious acts of violence as sacred. Walter's ritual killings began with chilling precision. He targeted sinners he believed deserved punishment, marking each body with a unique number, signifying their place in the 21 Sacraments. These murders were brutal and symbolic, each more unsettling than the last. His victims ranged from a priest he once trusted to innocent children, demonstrating his complete disconnection from humanity. As he progressed, Walter mutilated the bodies, sometimes extracting the heart, and meticulously marked each of them. The police eventually captured Walter after a series of 10 murders, but his legacy of horror continued even after his death. While in custody, Walter took his own life. However, due to his distorted beliefs in the power of the rituals he had performed, his spirit did not rest. This marked the beginning of an even more supernatural chapter in his life, as his soul split into two entities: an adult Walter, who continued the killings, and a ghostly child version of Walter, symbolizing the innocent part of his soul that only wanted to find his mother. In death, Walter's killing spree intensified, unleashing his supernatural wrath on those he deemed necessary for his ritual. Driven by an unrelenting desire to complete the 21 sacraments, Walter continued murdering, dragging his victims into his twisted otherworld, a hellish manifestation of room 302 and the places of his trauma, such as Wish House and the water prison of Ashfield. His victims included mostly strangers to his past, but individuals marked by their proximity or symbolic value within his demented ritual. One of the most chilling aspects of Walter is his ability to create entire alternate realities, trapping his victims in his personal hells. The locations of his otherworld serve as manifestations of his traumatic past, revealing the horrifying environment that shaped him. The water prison, for instance, symbolizes his years at Wish House, the abuse he suffered under Andrew DeSalvo, and the torturous settings that reinforced his isolation and suffering. Each level of the otherworld reflects Walter's fractured psyche, ensnaring anyone who crosses his path. The climax of Walter's murders leads to his final two victims, Eileen Galvin and Henry Townsend, the protagonist of Silent Hill 4. In Walter's mind, Eileen represents the reborn mother, symbolizing his longing for maternal comfort, while Henry embodies the receiver of wisdom, a witness to his horrific acts in his symbolic opposite. Walter's relentless pursuit of these two characters serves as the culmination of his dark pilgrimage, as he attempts to kill Eileen in a replica of his apartment, and Henry confronts his monstrous form in a nightmarish version of room 302. Walter's eventual defeat at Henry's hands marks the symbolic end of the torment he represents, though at a high cost, as the horror he unleashed leaves a lasting mark on those who survive. Ultimately, Walter Sullivan is not just a figure of terror, but a profound example of how abuse, isolation, and distorted beliefs can transform a person into something monstrous. His story is both a tragedy and a horror, portraying the descent of a deeply wounded individual who becomes so consumed by his own suffering that he destroys everyone around him, including himself. As we reach the end of this list, it becomes clear that Silent Hill has a unique power to bring the most disturbing aspects of the human psyche to life. Each character we've explored embodies a different facet of horror, from personal trauma and distorted beliefs to fanatical devotion and delusion. These villains remind us that Silent Hill doesn't rely solely on monsters or gore to unsettle its players. It delves into the darkest corners of human nature, revealing the terrifying things people can become when pushed to their limits. What makes these characters particularly unsettling is not just their actions, but the tragic circumstances and psychological wounds driving them. They offer us a glimpse into the complexities of pain, obsession, and suffering, making them as tragic as they are terrifying. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed my video, I'd love to recommend another one for you to watch.